This story is titled, My Parents Left Me to Bleed Out So They Could Celebrate My Sister's Success. Now they're the ones losing everything. So, I've been holding this how in for a long time. Figured Reddit might be the place to finally get it off my chest. I'm Ashley, 30 years old, and I run a small custom motorcycle repair shop. Well, I used to anyway. More on that later. Growing up in Bristol, Tennessee, I sucked. Not because of the town, but because of my family situation. See, I have a younger sister, Tyler. She's 3 years younger than me, and in my parents' eyes, the sun basically shines out of her ass. Our house was basically the Tyler Show 24/7. Our living room looked like some kind of weird softball museum, all her trophies displayed like they were Olympic medals or something, team photos everywhere. Her old jerseys hung up in frames like she was Babe Ruth or some. I'm not even kidding. My parents had a special cabinet built just for her sports stuff. Meanwhile, my stuff? I was pretty good at auto shop in high school, won a few awards for engine rebuilds. Know where those ended up? In a drawer somewhere, or the trash? Maybe got a "that's nice" from my dad once in a blue moon. I remember spending a whole summer when I was 16 fixing up this old Kawasaki engine. Saved for months working at the gas station to buy all the parts. When I finally got it running, I was so proud I called my dad out to the garage to show him. Dude barely looked at it. Stood there for maybe 20 seconds, muttered, "That's nice, daughter." Then immediately asked if I'd seen Tyler's batting stats in the paper that morning. Like, are you kidding me? This was basically my entire childhood. My mom would spend hours making Tyler's favorite meals before her games. Gotta make sure my all-star has her energy. But when I had a bike show, just grab something from the fridge, Ashley. Dad would leave work early for every single one of Tyler's games, but was too busy at the office to come see me win second place at the regional custom bike competition. I stopped even telling them about my competitions after a while. What was the point? And holy act, the money they spent on Tyler. Private coaches, fancy equipment, traveling teams that went all over the state. Thousands and thousands of dollars. Meanwhile, I worked 2 jobs in high school just to afford tools and parts for my bikes. Never saw a dime from my parents for my stuff. The muck up part is, I didn't even hate Tyler for it. She wasn't a bad kid, really, just spoiled as hell and completely clueless about how unfair everything was. Sometimes I'd catch her looking uncomfortable when they'd shower her with praise right after ignoring something I said, but she never spoke up. Why would she? Kid was living the dream. By the time I turned 18, I knew I had to get the cash out of there before I lost my mind. I'd been saving every penny I could, and I managed to rent this tiny garage about 8 miles from my parents' house. Close enough that they could reach me if they ever bothered to try, but far enough that I didn't have to watch the Tyler worship service every day. I built that motorcycle repair business from absolutely nothing. No help from mom and dad, no fancy loans or family connections, just me busting my ass 16 hours a day, sleeping on a nasty old cot in the back of my shop for the first year until I could afford an actual apartment. It was hard as pow my hand, but I was good at what I did. Word got around that I could fix and modify bikes better than the dealerships for half the price. That shop became my whole life. My dog Max would hang out with me all day, sleeping in the sun by the door while I worked. I felt like I actually mattered there, like I was worth something. Everything was going pretty okay. Business was good. I had my dog, my shop. I thought maybe my life was finally on the right track. Then came the day, 2 years ago, that opened my eyes on exactly where I stood with my family. It was a Tuesday. I was working on this sweet Ducati that some rich woman from Nashville had brought in for custom work. She wanted all these fancy mods that were honestly kind of a pain in the ass, but she was paying top dollar, so I wasn't complaining. Max was in his usual spot by the door, snoring away like the lazy bastard he is. I had AC/DC blasting from my crappy old speakers. I was using my plasma cutter to modify the frame. I'd done this exact same thing like 100 times before. Nothing complicated. But this time, man, I still don't know exactly what happened. Maybe the metal had some defect. Maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention. All I know is 1 second I was focused on making a clean cut, and the next, there was this horrible sound like metal tearing, a shower of sparks, and then the plasma cutter kicked back hard. The cutter sliced right through my right leg just above the knee. I remember seeing the metal glow red hot as it tore into my flesh, and the smell, holy. The smell of my own burning flesh. I screamed so goddamn loud that Max jumped up barking like he was going to fight whatever hurt me. Blood started pumping out immediately. not just bleeding, but gushing with each heartbeat. I fell backwards and cracked my head on the concrete floor, which didn't help matters. The pain— Help! Somebody help me! I screamed. But my shop is pretty isolated. No way anyone was going to hear me over the music. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely reach for my phone. Blood was pooling under me fast, spreading across the shop floor like I'd knocked over a can of paint. With my bloody fingers smearing the screen, I finally managed to call my mom. When she picked up, I was gasping, barely able to get the words out. "Mom," I choked out. "I'm hurt really bad. The cutter, my leg, there's so much blood. I need help now." Her response was completely casual, like I'd called to ask what's for dinner. "Ashley, honey, we're kind of in the middle of something important. Can you call an ambulance?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, please," I begged, my voice cracking. "I'm losing too much blood. I don't think I can. I need help right now. Please." I was starting to feel lightheaded, and the room was spinning. "Just hold tight, Ashley. We'll be there when we can," she said. And then the line went dead. She hung up on me. I was lying there on the concrete, pressing my shop rag against the wound, but it was soaked through with blood in seconds. My vision was getting all tunnel-like, black creeping in from the edges. I tried to call 911, but my fingers were too slippery with blood to hit the numbers right. Max was freaking out, kept barking, whining, and nudging at my face like he was trying to keep me awake. With what felt like the last bit of strength I had, I tried calling my mom again. No answer. Then my dad, straight to voicemail. Figures. I tried to say my last prayer, but Max wouldn't let me die peacefully. Just as I was about to lose consciousness, my phone buzzed. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. I thought they told her about what happened to me, and she was checking to see what to do. "Tyler," I gasped, struggling to get the words out. "Help! Accident at the shop. Bleeding bad. Need help now." There was a pause. For a second, I thought maybe she hadn't heard me. But then she laughed. "Oh, crap. Sorry. Thought you were someone else calling to congratulate me. We're celebrating my draft pick, Ash. Braves just signed me. $2 million contract." In the background, I heard my mom's voice. "Tyler, honey, come take a picture with the scout." I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. My head was spinning. I could feel the blood seeping faster under me. "Tyler," I whispered, but the line had already gone dead. My dad's voice boomed in the background, faint through the phone before it cut off completely. "That's my girl, professional softball player. Always knew you had it in you." So there I was, bleeding out on my shop floor while my entire family was just 8 miles away partying because Tyler got a contract. They couldn't be bothered to drive 10 minutes to help me. "Tyler, please," I whispered, but she had already hung up. My vision was fading fast now. The pain was starting to feel distant, replaced by this weird floating numbness. Not a good sign. I knew enough about injuries to know I was going into shock, probably dying this time for real. Max's barking suddenly changed, becoming more frantic. Through my fading consciousness, I heard the shop door slam open. "Ashley, I brought you some— Oh my God, Ashley!" It was Henry's voice. Then his face appeared above me, total horror in his eyes. I didn't like him seeing me like this. I always tried to seem tough, strong. "Ashley, stay with me. Don't close your eyes." He was already on his phone, screaming at 911. "Severe laceration, arterial bleed, patient losing consciousness. Send an ambulance now." He ripped off his belt and wrapped it around my thigh, yanking it tight as a tourniquet. The pain jolted me back to consciousness for a moment. "Henry," I mumbled. "Don't talk. Save your strength." His hands were covered in my blood, but he didn't hesitate for a second. "They're coming. Just stay with me, Ashley. Please stay with me." I wanted to tell him I didn't need an ambulance. I was already saved, right there in his arms. If this was how I went out, at least I had the best view. The last thing I remember before passing out was his eyes filled with tears, and his voice repeating my name over and over. I later found out that Max had been barking nonstop for so long that Henry came to check what was wrong. If he hadn't shown up when he did, I wouldn't be typing this right now. The doctor told me I was about 5 minutes away from bleeding out completely. I woke up to the steady beep of hospital monitors and that weird antiseptic smell hospitals always have. My leg felt like it was on fire, but at least I was alive. Henry was asleep in the chair next to my bed, his clothes still stained with my blood. Looking at him there, even with his hair all messed up and dark circles under his eyes, I realized how lucky I was that he found me. The doctor came in a few hours later, looking serious with his clipboard. "You're lucky to be alive. If your neighbor hadn't found you when he did, you would have bled out in another 5 minutes. He cleared his throat. "The bad news is the damage to your leg was extensive. The plasma cutter severed your femoral artery and caused significant nerve and muscle damage. We've managed to save the leg, but I could tell he was trying to find a nice way to say it. You'll need multiple surgeries, and there's a high probability you won't regain full function. With this kind of injury, it's likely you won't be able to stand for long periods again. Which means I finished for him, my throat dry. Which means I can't work on bikes anymore. The words felt like rocks in my mouth. My entire life, my business, my identity, everything I'd built was gone in a single moment of carelessness. Miserable silence filled the room until Henry stirred awake, rubbing his eyes. He looked at me and immediately leaned forward, taking my hand. "I was so scared," he whispered. "There was so much blood. I thought I was going to lose you." I tried to smile for his sake. "Thanks for saving my life." He squeezed my hand. "Have your parents been here? I tried calling the number in your emergency contacts." "Huh? My parents?" I just shook my head. I was too tired to explain the whole hush-up situation. Then right on cue, my phone buzzed. It was my dad. For a split second, I thought maybe they actually cared and were calling to check on me. "Dad," I answered, hating myself for still hoping. His voice came through, not concerned, just all businesslike. "Ashley, your mother and I need to borrow $25,000 for Tyler's equipment and relocation expenses for her new team." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "No, how are you? No, we heard you were hurt." Just straight to asking for money for Tyler. "I'm in the hospital," I said slowly, my voice shaking because I was trying not to completely lose it. "I almost died yesterday. Where were you when I called, begging for help?" There was an awkward pause before my dad responded dismissively. "Don't be so dramatic, Ashley. It was just a cut." "Just a cut?" I couldn't hold back anymore. "I nearly bled to death. The doctor said another 5 minutes and I would have died. And you were all too busy celebrating Tyler's contract to care." Henry was staring at me, jaw clenched, his eyes wide. "Look," my dad said, sounding annoyed like I was wasting his time. "We're sorry you got hurt, but Tyler's signing is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This is important." "And my life isn't?" I hated how pathetic I sounded. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. "We need that money by next week," he finally said. I hung up without another word. Then I opened my banking app and just stared at it. For 5 years, I'd been sending my parents $1,000 a month to help with expenses. I always figured it was the right thing to do. Now I knew where that money was really going. Straight into Tyler's career. With a few taps, I canceled the automatic transfer. Done. 5 years of giving them my hard-earned money, and they couldn't even be bothered to help me when I was dying. Henry watched me, his expression softening. "Ashley, did your parents really not come when you called them?" I nodded, my throat tight. Then I told him everything, about growing up as the forgotten daughter, about calling them yesterday and being ignored while they celebrated Tyler, about years of sending them money that they just funneled to my golden child sister. By the time I finished, Henry looked like he wanted to punch a wall. "That's not family," he said, his voice low but firm. "That's not how parents are supposed to act. That's just up." He stayed with me through that whole first week in the hospital. Every day he brought me decent food because hospital food is trash. Helped me figure out the TV remote. Talked about normal things to keep my mind off the pain. Nobody had ever done anything like that for me before. One evening, as he helped me adjust my pillows, I caught him smiling faintly at Max, who was curled up loyally by the bed. "You've got quite a family right here," Henry said quietly. "Me and Max, we're not going anywhere." Something about the way he said it made my chest ache in a completely different way than the injury. When he looked at me, it wasn't with pity. It was something else. Something I wasn't used to seeing directed at me. For the first time since the accident, I fell asleep with something almost like hope. The next few months were a complete show. Recovery from an injury like mine isn't just painful, it's humiliating. I went from being a woman who could rebuild an entire motorcycle engine by herself to someone who needed help just getting to the bathroom. 3 surgeries in 2 months. The first was to repair more of the damage to my leg. The second was to deal with an infection that popped up. The third was to try to fix some of the nerve damage. Each time they wheeled me into the OR, I wondered if this would be the one that finally fixed me. Each time I woke up, the doctors had that same careful look on their faces. The doctor had been right. I'd never stand long enough to work on bikes again, at least not the way I used to. 8 to 10 hours on my feet, working under bikes, crouching, lifting heavy parts, that was never happening again. My shop sat empty. I still had to pay rent on it, which was draining what little savings I had left. The medical bills were insane. Even with insurance, I was looking at over $80,000. My crappy insurance covered maybe half the surgeries, and that was after hours of fighting with them on the phone. Henry was the only thing keeping me from completely losing my He'd drive me to appointments, help with my exercises, and stay late into the evening just talking about normal stuff to distract me. Max adored him too, which honestly said a lot. My dog has never been wrong about people. Henry's coffee shop, our neighborhood coffee shop, because it felt like half the block lived there, was doing well enough that he started bringing me meals when he figured out I was skipping to save money. He'd sit with me while I tried to stretch my leg, encouraging me every time I wanted to throw the resistance band across the room. One evening, as he was helping me back into my apartment after therapy, sweat soaking through my shirt and my leg trembling inside its brace, I finally got the courage to ask him, "Why are you doing all this? I mean, I can't decide if you have a crush on me or if I'm just some pity project for you." He looked at me like I had grown a second head. "Because I care about you, dummy," he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Before I could respond, he leaned down and kissed me. It wasn't some perfect movie moment. I was sweaty and sore from PT, probably smelled like antiseptic, and was balancing awkwardly on my crutches. But for the first time since the accident, I felt like maybe my life wasn't completely over. "I've had a crush on you since the day I moved in next door," he admitted, blushing slightly. "I kept finding excuses to stop by, hoping you'd ask me out." I laughed weakly. "I thought you were just being nice." "I don't bring coffee to all the neighbors, Ashley. Just you." 2 weeks later, he was spending more nights at my place than his. It happened naturally. He was already helping with Max, already making sure I ate, already keeping me sane. When he suggested we make it official, I didn't hesitate. It should have felt strange, going from neighbors to roommates to whatever we were now, but it didn't. It felt right. During all this, did my family ever call to check how I was doing? Take a wild guess. The only contact I got was my mom texting to ask if I'd reconsidered helping with Tyler's expenses. I blocked her number after that. Meanwhile, my savings were nearly gone. Bills piled up and I couldn't work. My whole identity had been wrapped up in being a mechanic. What the hell else was I supposed to do? "What am I going to do, Henry?" I asked one night, staring at the ceiling. "I can't go back to what I was doing before. I'm useless now." He propped himself up on one elbow and looked down at me. "You're not useless. You're just different now. You still know more about motorcycles than anyone in this town. Fat lot of good that does me if I can't work on them." "So don't work on them," he said simply. "Teach other people how to." I blinked at him. Who the hell would want to learn from me? "Are you kidding? That kid Jaime is always hanging around your shop asking questions. Start with him." Jaime was this 19-year-old who had been pestering me before the accident, always asking about bikes. Annoying as hell, but earnest. The next day I called him. "Want to learn how to rebuild a carburetor?" I asked. He showed up at my apartment an hour later, looking like I'd just offered him a lottery ticket. I taught him from my kitchen table using diagrams and small engine parts I could manage while sitting. It wasn't glamorous, but the kid soaked up every word. I charged him $20 a session. It wasn't much, but it was something. Word spread. Soon I had 3 students, then 5. We moved the lessons into my garage, where I could at least have some proper tools around. It still wasn't much money, but it was enough to keep the lights on and make minimum payments on my medical bills. Henry watched it all with a smug grin. "You're a good teacher," he said one night. "You ever think about making this official, like a real trade school kind of thing?" I laughed, but the idea planted itself in my head. My leg wasn't getting much better, though. The doctor said I'd probably always have pain, a limp, and limitations. Some days were better than others, but I started to accept this was my new normal. 4 months after the accident, I was finally well enough to go back to my shop, not to wrench all day like before, but to try this new teaching thing for real. I set up a classroom space with folding chairs and a whiteboard. The work area was still fully equipped, but now it was where my students got hands-on experience. 6 regular students signed up, mostly teenagers and young adults who wanted to learn but couldn't afford trade school. I charged just enough to keep the place running. It wasn't making me rich, but between that and Henry's help, I was afloat. Then one evening, Henry walked in holding a stack of papers. "Ashley, let's make this official," he said. "Make what official?" "This. The school. Let's register it. Get certification. Do it right." That would cost a fortune, I protested. He grinned. My savings can cover the paperwork and upgrades. We'll be partners, business partners, and the other kind. He kissed me before I could argue. That night, as we filled out the forms together, I realized something. My parents had ignored me, abandoned me, and nearly cost me my life. But Henry had walked into the fire without hesitation. I wasn't worthless, I wasn't alone. I was finally building a life worth living, with someone who actually gave a damn. One evening, while I was sitting at my desk sketching out diagrams for the next day's class, Henry was up front helping close up. A minute later, he called back, his voice tight. Ashley, your parents are here. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen them since before the accident. They walked in looking exactly the same as always. Mom with her carefully styled hair and designer purse. Dad with his stern expression like the world owed him something. Neither of them even glanced at my leg brace or the cane I now used. Ashley, Dad said, getting straight to business. We need to talk to you about something important. I waited, not offering them a seat. Why should I? Tyler's having some problems with her team, Mom said quickly. The contract had fine print we didn't anticipate. She needs to buy out part of her agreement. It's a legal thing. Dad nodded gravely. It's going to cost around $450 million to fix this. We've looked at all our options, and the only solution is for you to sell this place. I just stared at them, not sure if I should laugh or scream. You want me to sell my business to bail Tyler out of a contract problem? This shop is just sitting here while you're recovering, Mom said, gesturing around like my entire livelihood was clutter she wanted to toss. If you sell it now, we can use the money to help Tyler, and there would be enough left for you to start something new once you're better. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Let me get this straight, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice level. You want me to sell the business that I built from nothing? The business I can still run even with my injury, so Tyler can get out of a contract she signed without reading? Dad frowned. Don't be selfish, Ashley. This is your sister's future we're talking about. And stop acting like this is a real business. What? Teaching kids how to screw in bolts? That's not a business. I nearly fell out of my chair. Selfish. Me. Before I could say anything, Henry stepped forward, eyes blazing. Selfish? Are you serious right now? My parents turned toward him, only then seeming to notice he was in the room. Ashley almost died, Henry said, his voice sharp with anger. She called you begging for help, bleeding out on the floor, and you ignored her. You were too busy celebrating Tyler to even care. She's been through 3 surgeries, might never fully recover, and neither of you visited her, not once. And now you have the audacity to show up here and ask her to give up everything she's built just to bail Tyler out of another mess? The room went dead silent, but Henry's words hung in the air like a slap. Mom looked offended. Who are you? This is a family matter. You stay out of it. No, I cut her off. Henry is family. He's more family than either of you have ever been to me. I pointed to the door. Get out, and don't come back. Dad's face turned red. You ungrateful! Get out, I shouted, standing up despite the pain in my leg. They left, Dad slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Henry came to my side as I sank back into my chair, my leg throbbing. I'm sorry, he said softly, taking my hand. I shouldn't have interfered. I squeezed his hand. No, you said exactly what needed to be said. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I felt guilty, because I didn't, but because I was still in shock that they would have the gall to ask me to sell my shop after everything they'd done, after everything they hadn't done when I needed them most. The next morning, I made a decision. I went to the bank and removed my parents from my emergency contact list. I called a lawyer friend and had him draw up a will, leaving everything to Henry. I even called the hospital and made sure they knew my parents were not to be given any information about me if anything happened again. I was cutting every single tie. A week later, Henry and I were cleaning up the shop after a long day when he suddenly said, I think we should make this official. Make what official? I asked. He gestured around. This, the school. Let's actually register it as a trade school. Get certification. Do it right. I looked at him like he was crazy. That would cost a fortune. Paperwork, licenses, equipment upgrades. He grinned. My savings can cover the paperwork. We'll be partners, business partners, and the other kind. He kissed me before I could argue. 2 weeks later, we submitted the paperwork to create Ashley's Motorcycle Technical Institute. It was still just me teaching in my old shop, but Henry insisted we make it sound professional. And you know what? For the first time in my life, I didn't care if my parents knew. Their opinion didn't matter anymore. That night, as Henry and I were celebrating with takeout, my phone buzzed. It was from Tyler, The first I'd heard from her since that family helps family line. Mom and Dad are freaking out. They might lose the house because of my contract thing. Can you help? I stared at the phone, remembering the sight of my blood pooling around me while they popped champagne. I typed back, "You're my sister, but none of you acted like family when I was dying on that floor. I've got a real family now. Good luck with your career." Then I blocked her number. Henry wrapped his arms around me from behind. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, actually, I think I am." Recently, I heard from an old high school friend that my parents ended up losing the house after all. They couldn't make the mortgage payments after spending everything on Tyler's buyout. They moved into a cramped apartment on the outskirts of town. Dad had to come out of retirement to work at a hardware store. Mom started working part-time at a department store. Karma's a dates. Whenever I catch myself feeling bad, I remember the sound of my own voice begging them for help while they laughed in the background, and that feeling disappears pretty damn quick. As for Tyler, her career crashed and burned. After all the money spent, she showed up to training out of shape with a major attitude problem. The team gave her multiple warnings before cutting her loose after just one season. Last I heard, she's working as an assistant coach at a small-town high school, still talking about her almost pro career. The golden child finally had to face reality. She wasn't special, just spoiled. And me? It's been 3 years since everything went down. Henry and I got married last spring in a small ceremony with just our closest friends and his family. Our motorcycle school is certified now, with a waiting list 2 months long. We're even planning a second location. My leg still gives me trouble, and I'll always walk with a limp. Some nights I still wake up sweating, phantom pain shooting through me. But Henry is always there, holding me until I fall back asleep. My old family left me to die. My new one gives me a reason to live, and that's more than enough. Sometimes when I close up the shop after a long day of teaching, I pause at the door and just look around. The sound of students laughing, tools clinking, the smell of motor oil mixed with coffee Henry brings in from his cafe runs. It's a world I never thought I'd have again after the accident. Henry catches me staring sometimes. "What are you thinking?" he'll ask, slipping his arm around my waist. "That I'm lucky," I always answer, and I mean it. Because the truth is, I shouldn't even be here. I should have bled out on that concrete floor, alone. My parents had made their choice. Tyler had made hers. But fate, or maybe just Henry and Max, made another one for me. Our wedding was simple. No over-the-top guest list. No fake smiles for people who didn't care. Just a handful of close friends, Henry's family, and Max, who trotted proudly down the aisle with the rings tied to his collar. When I saw Henry standing there waiting for me, eyes bright and steady, I felt something I had never once felt growing up in that house with my parents. Safe. We didn't need a big show. We just needed each other. Afterward, we rented a small cabin by the lake for our honeymoon. Nothing fancy, just quiet mornings, fishing rods neither of us knew how to use, and Max chasing birds across the water's edge. One night, Henry built a fire, and as the sparks floated into the sky, he took my hand. "You know," he said, "I used to think I wasn't the type to settle down. Too much work, too many responsibilities. But then you happened." I laughed softly. "Pretty sure most people wouldn't call me an easy ride." He kissed the top of my head. "You're not, but you're the best one." That's the thing about Henry. He doesn't see me as broken. He doesn't look at my limp or my scars and think of what I lost. He sees what I built, what I still build every day. He sees me. And that's all I ever wanted. The school has grown more than I ever dreamed. What started as me teaching Jamie at my kitchen table is now a fully booked program with students from 3 counties over. Some come in because they love bikes. Some come because they can't afford college and just need a skill to build their lives on. When they leave with grease under their nails and pride on their faces, I see pieces of myself in them. Henry and I joke that I've become Professor Ashley, even though my idea of a lecture is still mostly, "Don't touch that unless you want to fry yourself." But the kids respect me, and that feels better than any half-hearted compliment my parents ever tossed my way. Speaking of my parents, I haven't spoken to them since the day I kicked them out of my shop. I hear things through the grapevine. They lost the house, had to downsize. Tyler's still clinging to the glory of her one contract year, telling everyone at the bar how she almost went pro. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if they regret it. If they ever think back to the phone call I made, begging for help while my life slipped away. But then I remember how Dad's first words to me in the hospital were about Tyler's expenses, and I stopped wondering. Some people never change. And honestly, I don't need them to, because I have my family now. I have Max, who still curls up by the shop door every day like he's guarding me from the world. I have Henry, who holds my hand when the pain flares and kisses me like I'm the only woman in the universe. I have a shop full of students who look at me like I'm worth learning from. That's more family than I ever had growing up. The other night, after we locked up, Henry and I sat on the shop steps eating greasy pizza straight from the box. He nudged me with his shoulder. "You ever think about how far you've come?" he asked. "All the time," I said, looking out at the quiet street. "And it still feels unreal sometimes." "Good unreal?" I smiled. "The best unreal." He kissed me then, slow and sure, and I realized something. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing approval. I wasn't begging for scraps of attention. I wasn't bleeding on the floor waiting for someone to care. I was loved, fully, completely. And that more than anything is what saved me. So, if you're asking me now whether I regret cutting my parents off, not for a second. They left me to die. Henry gave me a reason to live. And every time I limp across that shop floor, with Max trotting by my side and Henry's laughter filling the room, I know I made the right choice. Because this messy, imperfect, beautiful life is mine, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.